Hi, and welcome to this week's Torah. Before we begin with this week's Torah/sermon, I'd like to take the opportunity to wish Chaim Aruchim to the family of the late Sidney Libert on the passing of Sidney this week. We wish you all Chaim Aruchim, as well as wishing Chaim Aruchim to the family of the late Peter Brody, who passed away last night. We wish them Chaim Aruchim as well. In this week's parasha, we read about the counting of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are counted a second time. We read about it already once in Shemos, how they were counted and the amount of people that they had. And yet in Shemos, when we read about it, there's one character that's missing there. Aaron the Kohen is not mentioned. Whereas in this count, it says, Se'u, count, as Rosh Kol Adas Me'Yisrael, the amount of people, the mishpachos and the families, their households. Who should count them? Together with these Nesiim, together with the princes, Tifkidu Osam, you should count them. Litziv Osam to the legions, Atam Aaron, you and Aaron HaKohen. And the Kli Yakar asks the following question. He says, why is it that the count in Shemos does not include Aaron at all? And the count here in this week's Pasha, Pasha's Bamidbar, does include Aaron. And he says a beautiful answer, and an answer that we really need to take to heart. The answer that he gives is as follows. He says the count in Shemos came after the Egel, came after the golden calf. The golden calf was a terrible tragedy. The Jewish people had sinned. The Jewish people had worshipped idols. And now that they had sinned and now that worshipped idols, so many of them had died, there was a chance to count the Jewish people. There was a need to count them to see how many of them had died. How many people did we lose in this tragedy? But who was to blame partially for this tragedy? Aaron was to blame for this tragedy. Aaron, who created the golden calf, the Jewish people had come to Aaron and had said, make for us a god, and Aaron created this graven image. So Aaron was partially to blame for it. So it's wrong to mention Aaron in a count where he is to blame for it. Because that count was to see how many people were lost, and we didn't want to implicate Aaron in this story. Now we've built the Mishkan. Now there's been a Hashras HaShechina. We've built the tabernacle. The Shechina, God's divine presence, rested once again amongst the Jewish people. And who was the conduit of that? Aaron was the conduit of that. Aaron was the one that brought the Shechina back amongst the Jewish people with his korbanos, which are the offerings. And now we're counting the Jews again to see how many Jews there are in this wonderful nation called the Jewish people that has God in their midst and has God as part of them. And there, we do want to mention Aaron. Because Aaron was one of the reasons that we had this Shekhinah, that we had this divine presence that rested amongst the Jewish people. That's the difference. That's why here we do not mention Aaron, because it has a negative impact on what Aaron had to done. And here we mention Aaron because Aaron was a force for the positive. Aaron was a force for the good. And this is really true for all of us. Do we dwell on the negative or do we dwell on the positive? Do we look for negativity or do we look for positive? I knew certain people, they were able to dwell on negativity for hours on end. And then if you wanted to tell them something positive, they'd have a short comment. Yeah, it's nice. This is terrible, it's diabolical, I can't believe it, it's so terrible, it's so bad, etc., etc. And when it comes to good, they got nothing to say. And there are people that dwell on the positive. And don't be sparing with the positive. Be positive in the way you dwell on things. Be positive in your outlook. Be positive in the way you speak to people and the way you look at people. Have a good eye. Because if you work with positivity, you got so much more of a chance of affecting really decent, good change. Rabbi Pesach Krohn tells the following story. He said his son was once riding around on his tricycle inside the house, banging into all sorts of things. And as he came whizzing around the corner, his yarmulke came flying off. And he kept riding without his yarmulke. And Pesach Krohn was getting frustrated with the whole thing, and he called him out to his son. He says, Eliezer, you're such a... And then he held himself back. So what am I going to say? I'm going to say he's terrible, he's a sheketz, he's not wearing a yarmulke. That's the lesson. And just then, that's when he made the U-turn. And instead he says, Eliezer, you're such a tzaddik. How could you go around without a yarmulke? And he said his son, whom I knew personally, who became a big ball player, who became a big Talmud Chacham, who Ashurim that listened the world over, always remember that lesson. Because it was a lesson shrouded in positivity. It was a lesson that was given with a positive slant to it, not by taking him and dragging him through the dirt and giving it a negative slant to it. So all of us, we have a choice. Whenever we say things and whenever we look at things, we have a choice. Do you want to look at it negatively or do you want to look at it positively? Do you want to say things nicely or do you want to really let the person have it? And what the Torah is telling us over here, we don't mention Aaron when it reflects negatively upon him. And we do mention him when it reflects positively on him. Accentuate the positive. Focus on the positive. Focus on the goodness in people. And if you focus on their goodness, you'll see you will bring out that good in a tremendous way. You'll have a much richer, fuller life because your outlook will always be positive. And therefore what you will see will always be positive as well. Wishing you all a very good Shabbos.